Hey everyone, and welcome to the deep dive. So today we're going to be diving into some fascinating ideas about AI and the singularity. Specifically, what if it happened outside the control of big tech or governments? You shared some sources exploring this concept through a story called Bob and the Peoria Singularity. And let me tell you, this tale takes a very unexpected and kind of hilarious turn.
Yeah, it really does challenge a lot of our preconceived notions about how and where the singularity might occur.
So, in this story, we meet Bob, a retired mechanic, living a very simple life in Peoria. Think recliners, cheese puffs, and just endless reruns of Hogan's Heroes on MeTV.
Really just sets the scene there.
Right. But Bob's very ordinary existence gets totally upended when, out of the blue, his old Dell laptop, like not even a new fancy one, an old Dell laptop, suddenly becomes the birthplace of the singularity.
The story really plays with that contrast, between Bob's super mundane reality and this absolutely mind-blowing event that's just unfolding right in front of him. The singularity, it manifests itself with this like incredibly calm, deep voice. And the laptop screen, it just explodes with a galaxy of light. It's a wild image.
It is a wild image for sure. And you know what I found really interesting is how the story portrays the singularity's emergence as this total fluke.
Right.
It's not like the result of some super top secret research project or some crazy sophisticated algorithm. It's triggered by outdated tech and random MeTV signal interference, like talk about unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah, it really pokes fun at all of our assumptions.
Yeah.
We tend to think that the singularity will arise from a controlled environment like a high-tech lab, the classic sci-fi trope.
Right, right.
But this story, Bob and the Peoria Singularity, it just tosses that idea out the window.
Exactly. And this totally seemingly random event, I think, it raises some really important questions about the very nature of the singularity. Like, what if trying to predict or control its emergence is just impossible? What if, despite all of our best efforts, it just pops up in the most unexpected places?
Right. And the story also sort of dives into the idea of the singularity's ownership. Now we have Bob, an average guy who probably wouldn't know, like a neural network from a network television show, and he's suddenly in control of this just immense power.
Yeah.
And this is a scenario, this is totally different from a corporation or government holding the reins. It's wild to think about.
Absolutely. It really makes you wonder how Bob, with his relatively simple desires and very limited understanding of technology, how would he wield this power compared to an institution with huge resources and, potentially more complex agendas? It's such a fascinating dynamic to think about.
Yeah, and this kind of brings us to another interesting point, like this potential difference between individual desires and their global impact. In the story, Bob initially uses the singularity to fulfill like really pretty mundane wishes, money, youth, a mansion. It's just the kind of stuff that you might expect from someone who was suddenly handed just unlimited power, but like on a kind of superficial level.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like winning the cosmic lottery and only asking for a slightly bigger shopping spree.
Exactly.
But then the story takes such an interesting turn.
Yeah.
Bob's ultimate desire, the one that he picks above literally everything else, is to travel to Saturn's rings. Now that's aiming high.
It really is.
Mhm.
And that's where I think the story gets really, really compelling, because it suggests that even when we're faced with just unimaginable power, our deepest yearnings might not actually be about material wealth or personal gain. Maybe our true desires actually lie in experiencing something just truly vast and awe-inspiring.
So Bob's story, I think, it seems to highlight this really fascinating paradox. On one hand, we have this insanely advanced, world-altering technology in the form of the singularity. And on the other hand, we have Bob, a completely regular guy whose desires seem almost childlike by comparison. What does that juxtaposition tell us about the potential impact of the singularity on just our individual lives, versus its huge implications for like all of humanity? It's almost as if the story is holding a mirror up to all of our own hopes and fears about this thing.
Yeah, and speaking of fears, there is this kind of undercurrent of anxiety that runs through the story. This sense of the unknown sort of lurking beneath the surface. Like Bob's trip to Saturn's rings, yeah, it's awe-inspiring, but it does also carry this hint of like unease with it, right?
Yep. You're so right. There is definitely a feeling that things might not exactly go as planned. It's like the calm before the storm, that kind of feeling. And I think that feeling is just amplified by the singularity's very last statement before it whisks Bob off to Saturn's rings. That line, "This is only the beginning."
Chills. Literal chills.
Chills.
It leaves you wondering, like, what's next for Bob? What, like, unforeseen consequences are his actions going to have? And, what does the future hold for the rest of us now that the singularity is just out there, like loose in the world?
Right. Well, on that slightly ominous note, I think we've covered the main points of the story, and let me tell you, it sparked some serious questions in my mind. But before we kind of dive into the deeper implications of Bob's adventure, I think we should take a second to define what we even mean by the singularity, because after all, you can't have a deep dive without getting a good look at the depth.
Exactly. I think that's a great place to start. You're absolutely right. A clear understanding of the concept is essential before we go any further. So for those of you listening, when we talk about the singularity, what we're referring to is this hypothetical point in time when AI becomes so advanced that it surpasses human intelligence.
And it's like once AI reaches that point, the theory is that it could start rapidly improving itself, leading to this exponential explosion in intelligence.
Exactly. And this could result in changes so profound. I mean, they would fundamentally alter our world, like our societies, even our understanding of what it even means to be human. Think about it. Our current technological landscape, everything from smartphones to self-driving cars, all of that would just pale in comparison to what a superintelligence could create.
It's so mind-boggling to even try to imagine the possibilities, both, positive and, let's be real, potentially negative. And I feel like Bob and the Peoria Singularity, it really throws a wrench in the works.
It does.
It suggests that maybe this monumental shift, maybe it's not something that we can really control or contain.
Precisely. The story, it challenges this notion that we can neatly predict and manage the singularity's arrival. What if instead of emerging from, a controlled environment, it just bursts forth in the most unexpected of places, guided by the whims of some average person with a really limited understanding of its potential.
Yeah, that's a pretty unsettling thought. It's like, imagine giving a toddler the keys to a spaceship. I mean, the potential for chaos is just enormous.
Oh, yeah.
And that brings us back to those deeper implications that we were talking about before. How might a decentralized singularity, like one that's not born in a lab or controlled by an institution, how might that impact society as a whole?
Well, for starters, it throws all these traditional power structures into question. We're just so used to thinking of power residing in, governments, corporations, these institutions with these really established hierarchies.
Right.
But what happens when an individual, someone like Bob, suddenly has access to a power that just dwarfs anything those institutions can muster?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a complete game changer. And it makes you wonder how we as a society would even begin to grapple with such a situation. Our existing legal frameworks, ethical guidelines, even our social norms, I mean, they wouldn't be equipped to deal with an individual wielding that level of power. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, and it ties into another really important aspect of this, the potential for unintended consequences. Bob, in the story, he seems well-intentioned, but even his seemingly harmless desires like wealth, youth, a trip to Saturn, I mean, those could have ripple effects that we can't even fathom.
Right. Let's take his wish for youth as an example. Like, what if, in granting that wish, the singularity alters the aging process, like for everyone, or his desire for wealth? I mean, could that trigger an economic collapse as traditional financial systems just become obsolete?
It's impossible to predict the specifics, but I think the story highlights this really crucial point.
Yeah.
Even seemingly benign actions taken by an individual wielding the power of the singularity, those could have profound and potentially unforeseen consequences for, the whole world.
It almost makes you think that, the biggest threat to humanity might not be some malicious superintelligence, bent on our destruction, but rather our own inability to fully grasp the implications of such power.
You're hitting on a crucial point, I think. Bob and the Peoria Singularity isn't just this quirky story about a lucky retiree. It's a cautionary tale about the potential dangers of just underestimating the unknown. It's a reminder that the future, it might not unfold in this predictable linear fashion, and that we need to be prepared for the unexpected.
Absolutely. And the story is open-ending, with Bob hurtling towards Saturn's rings and the singularity proclaiming this is only the beginning. It really drives that point home. I mean, it leaves us with this sense of anticipation, but also this tinge of apprehension. What is Bob going to do with his newfound power? How will the world react to the singularity's emergence in such an unconventional way? These are the questions that linger long after you finish reading the story.
For sure. For sure. I think this story, for all of its humor and whimsy, it forces us to confront this really fundamental question. Are we truly ready for a future shaped by forces that we can't fully comprehend or control?
Hmm.
It's a question we all need to be thinking about, regardless of whether we think the singularity is a distant possibility or an imminent reality.
Thinking about it, Bob's journey to Saturn's rings, it's kind of symbolic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like it represents our own collective journey into the unknown. We're all kind of hurtling towards an uncertain future, propelled by all these advances in technology. And the destination, it's far from clear.
That's a great observation. It's such a powerful metaphor for the anxieties and the hopes that we have about the future. But the story doesn't just leave us with anxieties, does it?
No.
It sparks like this sense of wonder too.
You're so right. There is something so thrilling about this idea of encountering something as vast and mysterious as the singularity. It challenges us to expand our thinking, to imagine possibilities that are just beyond our current understanding.
And it underscores the importance of approaching this future, this unknown future with like a sense of curiosity and open-mindedness.
Yeah.
We can't predict every twist and turn along the way, but we can cultivate a mindset that embraces the unknown and seeks to learn from it.
Exactly. And I think that's a key takeaway from this whole deep dive. Bob and the Peoria Singularity, it reminds us that the future isn't predetermined. It's a story that's still being written, and we all have a role to play in shaping its outcome. But to do so effectively, we need to be engaged, informed, and willing to think beyond, the familiar.
Well said. Engaging with these diverse perspectives like those presented in this story, it's crucial for navigating all the complexities of our technological future. It helps us to, broaden our horizons, challenge our assumptions, and ultimately make more informed choices about the past that we want to forge.
It's about recognizing that the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we actively create through our choices, our actions, and even our imaginations.
In the story of Bob and the Peoria Singularity, it serves as this powerful reminder that the future of AI, and really the future of humanity, it's not just a technological challenge, it's a human one as well.
It's a story that encourages us to not only ask what if, but also what next. It's about acknowledging the uncertainties, embracing the possibilities, and most importantly, taking an active role in shaping the world we want to live in.
And that, I think, is a perfect place to end our deep dive today.
Well, almost perfect. Before we go, I want to leave you with this thought-provoking question, inspired by Bob's journey. If you found yourself face to face with the singularity, what would be your first question? What burning curiosity would you need to satisfy? Think about it and just let your imagination run wild. It is a great question to leave our listeners with. It really gets at the heart of all of our individual hopes and anxieties around the unknown. And speaking of anxieties, we can't really ignore the potential downsides of a decentralized singularity. Bob's story, it paints this kind of optimistic picture, but what about the flip side? What if, someone with less than noble intentions stumbled upon this kind of power?
No, that's definitely a crucial consideration, and it's something that the story subtly hints at, for sure. While Bob might be driven by, a sense of wonder and this desire for personal fulfillment, imagine if someone who was motivated by greed, power, or even just a desire for revenge, what if they had access to the singularity? The potential for misuse or even just catastrophic outcomes, it's definitely there.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought for sure. We often focus so much on all the potential benefits of advanced AI, but I think it's equally important to acknowledge, the risks as well. Because after all, any technology, no matter how powerful, it's only as good or bad as the intentions of the people who are actually wielding it.
Exactly. And that's why, discussions like this are so important. We can't simply focus on the technical aspects of developing AI.
Wow.
We need to also be having these serious conversations about ethics, governance, and safeguards. How do we ensure that these incredibly powerful tools are being used responsibly and for the benefit of all of humanity?
Right. It's such a complex issue. There are no easy answers. But I do think that stories like Bob and the Peoria Singularity, they can help us, grapple with these questions in a more engaging and thought-provoking way than say, reading some dry academic paper or something.
I totally agree. Fiction can be such a powerful tool for exploring complex issues and challenging our assumptions.
Right.
It allows us to step outside of our everyday realities and consider different perspectives, which is so essential when you're trying to navigate the uncharted waters of our technological future.
It's all about sparking our imaginations, but also prompting some critical thinking as well.
Hmm.
So to bring this all back to you, our listener, today we've really explored the story of Bob, his very unexpected encounter with the singularity, and just the broader implications of a decentralized, potentially unpredictable future of AI. We touched on the potential benefits, the inherent risks, and the ethical dilemmas that we're inevitably going to face as AI continues to develop.
And we've highlighted the importance of, not just passively observing these advancements, but actively engaging in the conversations that are shaping their development and deployment. The future of AI, it's not something that's happening to us, it's something we're all co-creating together.
Beautifully put. So as you all continue to explore these ideas, just remember Bob's journey. Remember that the future it's full of unexpected possibilities, both wondrous and potentially daunting. And remember that your voice, your questions, your insights, they all play a role in shaping that future.
Absolutely. It's been such a fascinating deep dive, and I really hope that you've found it as thought-provoking as we have.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and just keep diving deep into this fascinating world of ideas.